Seeing some people file in, which is great. So welcome everyone. I'm actually going to put a question here on the screen. All right, so the next question, I got two questions for you, everyone here. What's one thing you're looking to walk away with today? We'll make sure you get it. And if you don't get it within the next kind of 30, 40 minutes here, we'll follow up and get it to you afterwards. All right. Thanks, everybody. So we're going to kind of jump in and introduce ourselves first and foremost. As I mentioned, my name's Evan. I'm here with the AD growth and marketing team. I'll do a little introduction for us just to kick things off, but really our two main speakers today who I'll ask to introduce themselves are JB and Alexi. JB, why don't you go ahead and just say a little something?
Hey, hi everyone. I'm super excited to be with you guys. So I'm in charge here of implementation here at ID. I'm a professional civil engineer from training to the past years worked in consulting engineering, worked on many projects. Now I've joined ID for several years now, and I enjoy soccer, biking, and always good for a good chocolate bar. So yeah, that's me. You can go. I can go. You guys can go.
Hello, everyone. I'm Alexi, head of operations here at ID. I've joined about a year and a half ago. ID. Love skiing and also a fan of IPA beers. If there are any fans as well, just give us a shout out. Heavy pass in IT, but the last 2 years been working on scaling the ID product, which we'll cover a little later.
Awesome. Thank you, Alexi. Thank you, JB. Quick introductions. Next up, just our agenda. So we're going to kick things off where Alexi and JB will talk about Excel in the wild. And really, this is just our learnings and observations here at AD, having worked with a number of construction managers and owners who are using Excel in their day-to-day. So we'll just sort of give some kind of thoughts on that. The next will be the 3 biggest risks that we've seen using Excel and kind of how to mitigate those. So we'll run through those. We have some gifts for you as you stick around kind of later in the presentation. So a few kind of takeaways and kind of like a goodie bag. And then of course, we'll close with a quick Q&A. We'll talk a little bit about what we do here at AD and then have some time for questions. Ideally, we're going to be out of here in about 30, 40 minutes. You can get on with your days and mornings. But yeah, happy to kind of stick around, chat at the end as well. So without further ado, I'm going to excuse myself from the panel here, and I'll hand things over to you, JB and Alexi, to talk about what we've seen a little bit.
Perfect. Do you guys hear me?
Yeah, coming through.
Perfect. Okay. Well, sorry, I had a little internet disruption. Yeah. So what we've witnessed here, just quickly, is we've been working with so many different customers here across the past several years, and we've noticed that usually they work with Excel, which is usually the main go-to. So we've been into many organizations, and we've noticed a certain pattern, and which has led us to come up with certain conclusions. Alexi, you've noticed some patterns here. Would you like to go maybe on and see explain what you've seen as well with some of the main practices?
Yeah, we of course have different teams here in the construction industry. You use Excel files for mostly commonly the same sort of elements. We use them for financing, we use them for status reports, we use them for operating expenses, and so on. So as we analyze all these files, we see these common themes. They're all mostly used for the same intent, but have different sort of structure and format. And of course, from those arise different challenges, which we'll cover today. So maybe you can give us a little idea, what is your biggest challenge while using Excel files and in these different fields? Do you use them for scheduling? Do you use them for budgeting? Do you use them for invoice, contract management, and so on? Maybe you can give us a few ideas of where you use it the most and what are the biggest risk you find. So as we see on the next page, Evan. just give us a few tips. Well, we've got Amanda saying here that she uses them a lot for submittals, trackings, material takeoffs, fulfillment, so on. Yes, that's a very not a common one we see as well. Okay, so JB, maybe you want to cover what are the trends we've seen after analyzing all these Excel sheets?
Yeah, so like you mentioned, there's so many files that exist on the market, and we actually know that it actually works. It works for many projects. You know, the major projects have been managed with a file here, another file in another compartment. Then they go on the cloud. They're able to share and exchange data quickly and stuff like that. However, we've noticed that there's some risks that arise, and we've been able to categorize them into three main categories. It's not necessarily the only ones, but we've noticed a lack of standardization is one of the main risks that we've noticed. We've also noticed that there's some difficulties as well with the version controls and which one's the right version, the latest version, especially at certain stages of the project. And mostly there's some challenges with the complexity. So these will be the main three risks we're going to cover today. This is not holistic. Definitely there's some more risk. And if you guys have some more that you guys want to share from your experience, some risks that you've noticed, don't hesitate to put them in the chat. So we're going to go over those three categories of risks, sorry. We're going to cover some examples, the potential impacts, and we're going to give you as well some opportunities to maybe reduce or mitigate the risk of those three. So let me just jump in right away with the lack of standardization. Okay, so just to share some of the examples we've had, I'm going to share here with you on the screen 2 examples that we've had. So they're in French. It doesn't matter, there's sometimes in English as well. So this specific customer on the left was having a progression report on the left. So he's sharing some metrics, some key metrics here in KPIs with a status in green, yellow, red. Everything seems right on this project. On the other hand, we have this other client, French customer as well, completely different. Initially, sometimes it was in Word, sometimes it was in Excel. So this document here on the right was much shorter. We don't see on the left. The one on the left has like 200 lines. This one is done with 40 lines. So I just want to ask you a question, and if you guys can, I'll give you a big thumbs up or a little GIF at the end, like Evan mentioned probably. But yeah, we have, what do they have in common? That's a little exercise. It's a trick question. They have something very major in common. Yeah, how about we go ahead, Evan, I'll give the answer right away. So the key thing they have in common is that basically this organization, they're all working for the same, they're all reporting to the same executive. These are 2 different project managers working within the same team, managing projects that are similar in sizes, similar in scope, in timelines and risks. However, the way they report their project is completely different. And the bulk of the work actually ends up on the executive side, which they have to wonder and do some tracking, do some correlation to see how their project is evolving within their portfolio. And so we realized that this is one of the main risks we realized is that each individual, usually, it might be the case in your organization, they tend to bring their own version of their own progress report or of their own budgeting or whatever Excel they used to have in their previous employers or in their previous experience. And sometimes whatever they prefer is not necessarily compatible with what the organization has in place. So that is one of the main risks we have noticed. So what are the impacts caused by this? We can reduce them to 4. We've noticed a lack of a data inconsistency problem. So each project manager here use their own approach and their reports certain things. And it's because it's so hard to compare and analyze data between projects, it's even harder for stakeholders or for project managers or executives or portfolio managers to notice the risk of errors or to notice the wrong patterns or the wrong direction of a project. We also, as I mentioned, this can lead also to an increased risk of errors. So we can see some potentially costly errors that are just missed or completely overlooked. And we also notice the difficulty of collaboration, which makes it harder for a new project manager to come and give it a hand to somebody, or having a program of data exchange between modules or software systems. And lastly, we also noticed that this lack of standardization can cause a lack of scalability or evolution. So as the projects become more complex, or as we want to integrate more solutions, can become increasingly difficult to manage all this data consistently and mostly efficiently. So what are the benefits? What are the advantages? What is coming up from this bettering standardization? We believe that we can provide a better data analysis with more time. We can provide a better way to identify trends and increase analytics and reporting capabilities. And if we dream and think a bit further, which is not too far off from what we know, we can increase the exposure to artificial intelligence and use some database systems to actually allow us to predict how certain trends, or to analyze and recognize certain trends within our projects. We've recently wrote a little article about how we can integrate ChatGPT for construction owners and construction managers within our platform. We can give you maybe a link to that, maybe or you guys can find it on our blog. But we believe that standardization can allow for some things such as machine learning and artificial intelligence within our projects. So yeah, that closes a bit. Alexis, you want to continue on version controlling? What did you notice?
Absolutely. So of course, version control is not stranger to anyone. Even if we have very standardized or very thorough files, we need to manage their versions. As we know, construction projects have multiple stakeholders. Most of them, or some of them, are outside the organization. So that forces us to share them via emails or different file transfer platforms, which complicates version control. And of course, we always have unexpected events which lead to data changes or data adjustments, unforeseen events, of course, that lead us to different versions of files and so on, which could complexify the situation a little, and sometimes even make us lose control of version control. So if we see a short example here on the next page, and I'm sure most of you have already encountered a similar situation, where you want to find a file of your colleague, which is the latest version, and you end up in this folder with with 4 or 5 files that have a different or similar naming, but with different tail names, and you try to figure out which one's the most up-to-date question. So maybe that's our second trickiest question. How do we know which is the latest file in this case? And even if well, 1 and 3 have the same timestamp, and we're sort of head scratching is asking, well, what's the latest version in this case? And of course, there's reasons behind this. We want to keep tracking of the different changes that occur in the field. We create new versions and so on. We attach them to emails, send them to contractors and so on. And that this complexifies a lot version control if not everyone's working on the same tool or the same platform. Of course, Excel and Outlook or sort of SharePoint, they become sort of like static tools, like in the sense that we have one static file. Not everyone is necessarily collaborating within the same platform, and we attach such files to emails. Those are static as well. Replies and back and forth, each have different versions. Ideally, what we see in SharePoint is the first evolution of that, where most of the time internal collaborators can collaborate on the same file, but when we need to publish it to external parties, then this is when it becomes a bit more tricky. We need to manage security and so on, and we don't necessarily have a single platform where all parties collaborate and exchange information. So maybe another question to engage a bit with our audience here: how do you guys manage your version control? Maybe there's other tricks you've seen. We've seen maybe long file names, as we just mentioned. Maybe use the last updated field. maybe different application that we've mentioned, or simply very good memory tracking. So maybe you can give us a little shout out in the chat while we keep covering this aspect. So impacts caused by poor version control. I mean, most of you are very familiar with this. I'm sure it's happened to you in the past. We've got fragmented or incorrect information. So this information is spread out over large or a certain amount of files, and then trying to understand which one is the most accurate, the most correct or true value. Then we've sort of when we need to come back on the project, maybe months, 2 months, 3 months, years afterwards, in the unfortunate event where we have some litigation to cover, and we want to understand what actually happened in the project, it becomes really hard to understand which is the actual source of truth, or what actually happened. And of course, all this becomes very inefficient or counterproductive when we need to exchange static files, and then this obviously intertwines lots of maintenance and so on, and ultimately an increase in cost. So very an issue here, of course, related to version control. Now, if, however, you do have a very sturdy system of version control, what are the benefits from that? So work is clear and in real time. So we've got the actual data that's the latest, the latest, most accurate value, and this is very important when it comes to time. When it comes to time to have like a real time decision, and you feel more confident about your decision making. Easier collaboration and updates, of course, with colleagues. So when you bring in the colleague into to the project, or you replace him if he's not there, much easier to understand the flow of information, and of course for him to make sure that he works on the most accurate data. Data is always up to date, so easier for outside stakeholders to have a snapshot of the project without necessarily having to interact with everyone, or asking for the latest version and so on. I'm sure most of you are familiar to this. And the instant reports and audits. So different stakeholders can generate the report themselves. Easier for different parties to come back on the project and sort of understand what happened without having to rebuild the story with multiple peers. So version control, very important aspect to consider while using Excel. And of course, we'll come to another solution at the end. Now, complexity. All of you that work here in construction projects here are very familiar with this reality. Projects are becoming more and more complex, not only in terms of size, but in terms of amount or quantity of stakeholders, team players, and so on that are involved. Industry standards, norms, best practices have increased. The amount of reporting or stakeholder relationship or audit trails that are required are increasing. So this whole situation leads to files that grow in complexity. We want more and more tracking all the time. So with this leads to more complex formulas, more complex amount of tables, of tabs, and so on. And the question we're asking ourselves now today is yes, we can manage construction projects with Excel, but are we going to hit a limit at one point? So here are a few examples, okay, to illustrate our purpose. Here's a schedule here. Yes, of course, we can do a project schedule in Excel. We can have a work breakdown structure of 20, 50, even 100 activities. But at one point, we're going to reach a limit of Excel when we want to have a more elaborate scheduling. If we want to manage dependencies, calendars, efforts, and so on, it becomes challenging. And of course, schedules change over time. So each time we want to modify a schedule, it becomes tricky in Excel. We can do it, but we at one point will the complexity of the project itself will overcome the capabilities of Excel, and then we'll need to move on to other tools such as MS Project or others we can discuss. Here's another example here where payment request tracking. So yes, we can we can track different payment requests that are done by contractors on a monthly or by a weekly basis. That's fine when we have 1, 2, 3, 4 suppliers. When we start having like 20, 30, 40 different suppliers that on a 1, 2 year, 3-year project, then tracking all those payment requests and comparing them to the engaged amounts and making sure that we're on track with that becomes very, very complex. And yes, we can have sturdy Excel files that have very complex formulas, but when comes a time to change that structure, that becomes really challenging. And when we couple this with standardization, so as we mentioned earlier, we want to have a status report, or here's a sort of a project a project template file here, or a project page file. We want to aggregate all that information into a standard format. Then compiling all that data through Excel and being responsible for the accuracy of those formulas, just to bring it to a very synthesized or structured or simple view, so we can share this with our boss, our director, or our various stakeholders. Then that becomes tricky as well, especially when it comes the time to change some formulas and make sure that the oversight or the high level view is still accurate, then that becomes a real challenge. So maybe you want to tell us a bit more on some complex sheets you've heard, maybe some situations where you've reached limits of Excel in terms of complexity, or maybe some aspects of your project management, construction project management that's complex to manage with Excel. We'd be glad to hear it. Okay, so what are the impacts now of managing complex or facing complex projects with Excel? Of course, the number one impact, and we've covered this as well in the 3 previous challenges, is the risk of error. So as formulas and relationships between different entities become more complex, as requirements become more complex in terms of trying and so on, and then of course the risk of error is undeniable. When a new regulamentation or a new our finance department asks us for a new tracking, a new value, a new KPI, and so on, updating these sheets become very tedious, very risky in a certain way, and especially when you're not the initial author of those files. So that happens a lot. We inherit a template or a complex Excel sheet from past colleagues have been working and updating it for years, and we try to sort of understand how the logic was applied. That becomes very time consuming. And of course, at one point, when projects become so complex that we have 24 tabs and these formulas that try to verify all different kinds of conditions, it becomes, we'll hit a limit to Excel, and becomes very complex, and we need in those cases try to think of more elaborate tools to manage this complexity and offload it to a tool that's really specialized in the matter. However, if you do have very complex files and can manage this complexity, of course, much more accurate information, changes that occur on the field in the regulatory statuses or in terms of KPI tracking, if you want to adjust those much faster, much faster way. You can tackle more complex projects, of course, so the ability to undertake more complex projects. And finally, as I mentioned, was the detailed page. When you couple managing complexity with standardization, then you can share and give a high level understanding of the project much more efficiently, quickly, and accurately.
Hey, thank you, Alexi. It's very nice. So yeah, in quick summary, these are the 3 main categories we found. So a lack of standardization, as we mentioned, just to remember, the difficulty in versioning control sometimes can cause some issues in our projects, and also an overly complex project can also bring us to the edges of what is possible to manage efficiently within Excel. So what do we do next? This is the point here that we want to convey. Your reality is really common amongst our peers, within the construction industry. There's some trends that we are able to target, and we've been able to suggest here to you guys maybe a better solution to bring those risks to a most minimum possible, the most minimum possible. So what we're trying to suggest here, we have created a little template here for you guys to help you upgrade. This is from Excel to a better solution with a simple, clear steps. So what do we need to organize? What do we need to assess on our end? Are we ready to upgrade? Are we ready to move to something else? Of course, there's some changes that are required, and so we have definitely elaborated them and created a step-by-step guide to help you necessarily upgrade and minimize the risks that we've mentioned, and maybe some of the risks that you guys are encountering on your organizations. And so if you see, we're creating this with ID. And so the question is, well, who's that dog? Why is there a dog? Why is it ID? Who are we? So how about Evan, you go on and explain a bit what do we do here at ID, and we can maybe definitely provide some answers to the questions we have.
Thank you, JB. Thank you, Alexis, for all that Excel knowledge, in the field Excel knowledge. And I want to thank everyone for your comments and attention and time so far. We're just going to talk just a few minutes about AD and what we do. So who's the dog? And then we'll go right into questions and answers. And I know some of you had some questions from earlier that we'll be able to circle back on. But realistically, what is AD? Who is AD? AD today is a cloud application built for construction owners. So we've been around for about 10 years, and the focus of our software is on the needs of construction owners in particular. When we looked at sort of the landscape of technology for construction, there's one or two big names out there for construction contractors, architects, engineers. But when it came to the needs of construction owners in terms of getting an overall view on their entire portfolio in one simple place, there was nothing out there. We were seeing these crazy Excel setups that were, complex and tough with version control, and of course lacked standardization. So it's a cloud application, meaning you can access it from anywhere. We can deploy it very quickly. We're working with companies of all shapes and sizes that we'll cover in just a moment here. In particular, though, the platform is built for every step of your project lifecycle, your portfolio. So from initialization through to closing, with lots of different, functions and features at every step of the way. Obviously, we hit the essentials, managing your financing, managing your budgets, managing your schedule. So you can sort of think of MS Project in the cloud, as well as contract management, and then so many other functions and features. We just didn't want to crowd the slide and overwhelm you all, but the idea is, some really core pillar functions in the platform on offer to you. Everything's connected, everything speaks, and as I said, it's always being updated and always being improved. So Alexis, obviously, I'm just gonna hand it back to you. If you could really quickly walk us through how AD probably helps with some of those challenges that we've covered and discussed earlier on.
Sure. Well, it was no surprise that when we've designed ID, it's with these three challenges in mind. Of course, to better the situation and make it a bit more productive. So standardization, how do we do that? We do have standard forms. Project managers are forced to structure the documentation in a very, very thorough way. And of course, this is based on PMI best practices in first part, but in second, we allow you to customize or define some values that are proper to your organization to standardize and structure the information in a very thorough company-wide format. Of course, version control is key here as well. So version control is managed different ways in ID, either here through your submittals or our shop drawings, where we have a very thorough version control, but also by inviting external parties in our platform for them to document part of the information through very thorough, of course, access control. And from there, we all work on the same platform, which renders version control in a much more efficient way. And finally, you offload the complexity to us. So all these fancy formulas, all the budget controls, all the contract management calculations, schedule of values, invoicing, and so on, all that is tracked and calculated through our software to offload the complexity from the project manager to the software and be much more confident about the results of those calculations and, of course, the resulting reporting that comes from these calculations. So in a nutshell, this is how we tackle those challenges. We work with large customers here in Quebec, and so we've got public institutions as well as private institutions that are spread out in many verticals, municipalities, healthcare, consultants, and we've got on the private side in retail and different industrials that work with us at various sizes. So we from small companies have multiple small projects, or we've got large corporate companies that have very long multi-year construction projects. So that's a very brief overview of our solution. And of course, if some are interested, we can go into more details together individually. But Evan, maybe before we wrap it up, we leave them with a gift.
We promised you, and we're here to deliver. So on top of the Excel upgrading from Excel guide that we'll send over, as well as a recording of this webinar, if you ever want to go back to some of those action-packed moments, we'll also be sharing with you all a Excel template specifically around a project status report and just helping to helping you, maybe giving you some ideas or even giving you a new template that you can adopt in your day-to-day. Curious if this is something, and if you want to just drop in chat if you're interested in this, we'll make sure to send it over after the webinar. So just a quick like me, I want it. But obviously we're, yes, we are a software solution, and, we want to make your life as easy as possible, but maybe you're just at a stage in your project management, level or needs where Excel is still, can still meet your needs. But as we've said, it has its limits. You'll reach that upper limit in terms of complexity or standardization or anything like that. And that's where we'd love to have a conversation. And, we obviously can show you more about what our software can do. So with all that said, we'll move into sort of the last section here. So Q&A. I already know there's been some great questions, which I will put to our two experts here. And if you have any more, please feel free to use the Q&A function, use the chat function. It doesn't matter. We're looking at both of them, and we'll slowly start to wrap up here. But before just jumping on to questions, I just want to thank you all for your time and thank you all for coming. Obviously, really, really appreciate your attention and your time with us this morning. So without further ado, I'll kind of pull the question earlier from Jonathan, where he asked if we've observed construction projects using Power BI, classic Microsoft product, recording dynamic progress or updates. So I know this question we get often. So maybe Alexi, I'll invite you just talk a little bit about what we've seen from Power BI and shortcomings.
Sure.
Yeah.
So yes, we've seen we've been asked for some Power BI integrations from our software too. So obviously Power BI is used with the rest of the Microsoft suite is used quite often. It's mainly used to aggregate existing information, to have the live aspect and beautiful dashboards and so on. So that's great for that. However, what's tricky is when you want to invite external parties to add their data. Example, you want to invite a contractor for him to submit his payment requests, then and to make sure that we don't have like different versions, and I'll send you my file, then send it back that file and so on. Power BI does not solve that challenge in that sense. So it's an excellent reporting tool, but to aggregate information and collaborate on various moments of the project, and then from there publish that information, it's more limited. So yes, Power BI, great reporting tool, but when we want to aggregate different information from different parties, then we need a software for them to collaborate and then export that data to Power BI or similar solutions.
Thank you, Alexi. Power BI, great for reporting, not from much else. Next question, again from Jonathan. Thanks again. Do you regard Excel as supplementing the data or information required for project management or control. So calling out enterprise systems like AConnect, Primavera, collaboration, document collaboration for finance schedule, document control measures, they're all standard. So yeah, I think talking about how Excel, maybe works in tandem with AD and where that relationship remains would be great. Alex, I see you nodding your head, so.
Sure.
Yeah,
Also,
I'm gonna go ahead and then JB can add on.
So very like there's multiple ways of answering that question. So the way I see it is that we need a sort of, as you mentioned, like a center database to store all that information and make sure that we have the most up-to-date information. Now, as for exporting, yes, we can export reports in Excel. We can view different graphs in Excel and so on. But when the core of the operations are managed through data inputted into Excel, then that's where the challenge sort of arises. So the idea is we collaborate, we have all this data flowing through a central system, and then on a periodic basis, we extract that information. It could be in Power BI or it can be in Excel and so on, in a format that's maybe a bit easier to share, or an instantaneous view of the main sort of database structure. So that's I see as like our solution, of course, does not eliminate Excel entirely in the sense that it uses to export data for reporting. But most of the activities, or the project manager, what he does when he manages his project on a day-to-day basis, he does it in the software, and then from there we can export some data into Excel.
Awesome. Thank you, Lexi. So there you go. Excel. We don't hate it. Still serves a purpose, right? Well, we're looking towards the future. Any other questions or questions from the audience? Or any questions? Curious about 80. Last question, Jonathan, our hero. Have you integrated your platform with Power Automate? Very specific.
I must admit, I've never heard of Power Automate, but I can say generally that we do have some APIs that allow to export some information, not all, but some information on our platform to different tools. But so as I see, it's an AI connector, so maybe we'll look into this. Interesting.
Even more futuristic.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thanks for mentioning that, Jonathan.
Yeah, I mean, always when it comes to integrations, it's easy to we get a lot of suggestions, a lot of ideas, and so obviously we're always going to be looking at the ones that will give the most direct and realizable value for our current and future customers. So always very kind of open to those conversations, those discussions, and definitely the platforms that you're already using today. We don't want to try to create more work or add an extra layer where it's not needed. We're in the business of keeping things straightforward, streamlined, always online, always accessible, things like that, for sure. Well, listen, I dropped the AD contact page in the webinar chat. You can actually book some time directly with myself, yours truly, if you'd like to have a little follow-up conversation about 80, who we are, what we do, etc. Would be very happy to connect with you all. Otherwise, what you can expect from us is a follow-up with recording of this, our guide for upgrading from Excel, and lastly, that Excel template, which for us is really going to be the first of many templates that we want to equip you with to be able to use and run with Excel as much as possible until such a point that you think you need something more robust. And of course, we love to help you with that as well. So that's about as much of a sort of scripted content we have for today. I want to thank you all again for your time and attention. It means a lot to us that you took the time of your morning to attend here, and we definitely look forward to staying in touch and answering any questions that might come up after the fact. So yeah, if you have any other thoughts or anything like that, feel free to drop them in the chat. We'll hang around for a few minutes, but we'll slowly start to wind down. So goodbye, everybody. Have a great rest of your work days. And hope to stay in touch soon. Like JB, would you like to sign off? What is our sign off again? Happy project management, right? That was JB. He came up with that one. Yeah, and that's how the cookie crumbles. No. Thank you all. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Yeah. I think we can stop the share. And we'll wind down here. All right. Thanks, everyone. Take care.